Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to session 3B, creating a winning and successful project team. Hope you all are very much enjoying the Town Hall 2024 so far. Would like to introduce our session leader here, Jeff Loyall. Jeff is from Turner Construction. He's the vice president for Turner Construction Company, where he's responsible for managing healthcare projects in the Midwest. Under Jeff's direction, Turner has successfully completed numerous healthcare projects for high-profile national clients. He's got 38 years of experience, and a lot of that building successful teams, and he's going to give us some of the secrets to the sauce here. So,
thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. And thanks for all being here. A couple of things. Sean had said that I have been in the business for 38 years. And for those of you that know me, probably think that I am the ideal candidate in order to be the moderator for this panel. And people are like, why in the world are you the ideal candidate, Jeff? Well, I've been around for 38 years. I guarantee you I've made more mistakes in this industry than anybody in this room. So what does that give you? That gives you lessons learned and best practices, which to me are absolutely priceless. And we want to do a little bit of that, talking about lessons learned today on how you create a winning and successful team in the design and construction industry. A major element in our industry is in order to win work, is the quality and background of the project team that you propose for future projects, right? That's how we win work, okay? But how many people out there have been in second place? Huh? Have we all done presentations? How many have been in second place, right? So what do we do in the design and construction industry when we come in second? Now, granted, sometimes we come in fourth, sometimes we come in third, but most of the time the feedback is, oh, you were a close second. What's the feedback that you get? Typically, the feedback that you get is that there was a better team and they're the ones that won, right? So how do you become that better team? And that's exactly what we want to talk about today, is what are the lessons learned and best practices that we can glean from our panel of experts in order to arm you as you leave from takeaways as to how to be successful so the next time you can create your winning team. All right? So let me introduce the distinguished panel to you. First of all, Cindy Leitson. Cindy is the Vice President of Capital, Construction, and Facilities at Cuyahoga Community College, or Tri-C, as we commonly refer to it in Cleveland. She is responsible for maintaining, improving, and repurposing existing facilities and for developing new facilities and managing capital assets. She oversees services including facilities and operations, maintenance, facility construction and renovation, infrastructure replacement of furnishings and equipment, site development and college-wide integrated facility planning, sustainability, real estate services, and asset management. Cindy's been with Tri-C since 2010. Cindy, thank you for being here. To Cindy's left and your right is Jonathan Lusin. Jonathan is a principal at IKM with 25 years of architectural expertise, specializing in higher education, healthcare, and workplace sectors. His experience encompasses a range of technically complex projects for clients such as Case Western Reserve, Cleveland Clinic, Ohio State University, and the University Hospitals. Jonathan brings a strong focus to creating effective project teams, which he has been instrumental in both securing and delivering successful outcomes. Jonathan, thank you for being here. Joanne Brown. Joanne Brown is an Assistant Director of Planning and Design within the Division of Campus Planning and Facilities Management at Case Western Reserve University. Joanne has over 35 years of experience in project management leadership with a strong background in architecture, interior design, and facility management. Having worked in a variety of fields with varying degrees of resources and capital allocation, Joanne offers a diverse knowledge and expertise in successfully managing areas of design, planning, and project oversight. Joanne has been with Case Western since 2008. Joanne, thank you for being here. And lastly, Taurean Spratt. Taurean is the Vice President and General Manager of the Cleveland Business Unit for Turner Construction Company. With a proven track record for success, Taurean drives strategic business development initiatives and oversees the day-to-day operations of the Cleveland office. He is dedicated to achieving both short-term and long-term business goals while embodying the company's core values and upholding the highest standards of business conduct. Taurean has been with Turner since 2004. Taurean, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Okay, so we are going to get started here, and I'm going to go right through all the slides I just talked about. So here is the rules of engagement, folks. First of all, there are no rules. Don't you love that? Secondly, we're about engaging and inspiring, so please engage. We're going to have a series of questions for our panel. You folks will also be a panel. I have a whole slew of questions for you, and we're looking for all of your feedback, okay? But again, we want you to be inspired, we want you to be engaged, we want you to have some things to take back with you. So, first question. So from the owner's perspective, Cindy Leitson, what do you look for in a project team when selecting partners?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Can everybody hear Cindy?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I think the first thing, first and foremost, as we're looking through projects and submittals and going from maybe having 10, 12, 15 firms and bringing it down to the first short list, we're looking through, certainly how technically strong the team is that's being presented for that particular project. We are looking at then, the type of project that we're doing, whether it's academic or infrastructure or whatever it is. Again, we look, very closely at the projects and how that align. Certainly, we're looking at the team synergies, how much of this team has worked together before. So, that's sort of the technical piece is the first piece I think we're all looking for. The other piece is just in general, from, how detailed, have they looked as you get into the second phase of the deeper RFP, and, how detailed is that plan? Have they identified, what we think to be the challenges, what are going to be the biggest obstacles, and of course we're looking for that kind of high level in the beginning, obviously, solution, and then from that, just, the thoroughness to that look and read of the plan. Most of the firms are always, visiting our campuses, looking at it, and they're trying to understand, what those obstacles are and how we're going to, work around that to make it a successful project. I think the other things that we look for is just simply the fact that, and I think we heard, I was at an event yesterday and we heard this, and we really count heavily on, there has to be a trust, within the team, within the project team, and we really do look for those people feeling comfortable and not afraid to have an open conversation, and I think that is key. If the schedule's off, if the cost is off, we don't want it just confirmed and push that down the road. We want to know as early as possible so that we as a team can solution through that. So those are the things, all of that plays in to the partners ultimately that are winning the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy. Any comments or questions on that from the audience? Yes.
Do you have preferred structures in how you build your team? Do you do design build, design bid build, you direct contract, you push through subcontracts?
So we now primarily do construction manager at risk. We do design build, and then really we have a lot of also small projects. When I say small, probably under $1 million, and those might be quicker moving in some cases. But for those, we do sometimes tend to do just a GC. But for the most part, the vast majority of our projects are either going to be CMR and design build. If that means instead of doing, one roof or two roof, I might have to bundle together 6 roofs, to do it, to make it a larger, that's what we do. Same thing, like if we're doing restroom renovations and I have over 420 restrooms, if I need to bundle, 75 to 80 or 100 to make it a little bit larger. But it also means it's also more complex because there's 4 large campuses and then 5 other smaller campuses. So it's 10 to 11 sites that you're scheduling a workforce through, and a lot of different people to communicate with.
Thank you, Cindy. I have been asked, not to put any pressure on anybody, but we are being recorded. So if we can go and talk into the microphone when we do our answers, that would be preferred. Okay, Jonathan, from the architectural perspective and engineering perspective, to go within that same boat, how do you ensure that the design vision is maintained throughout the project while also meeting the practical needs of construction and budget constraints.
No pressure, right? No pressure.
Get more money.
Well, first off, I think one of the things that we like to look at is really the stakeholder process in our design process. So, and part of that is defining who the stakeholders are in the project. And obviously, there's the client and the client stakeholders, and that could be vary based on the size and the complexity of the client. But also thinking about the community and other factors of who's financing the project, right? Who is engaged in the legal aspects of the project. Those are all stakeholders, right? So it's really, I think, that stakeholder definition that really is the beginning spot for all of that. And then that engagement that we have with the stakeholder group, really defining those guiding principles. And those guiding principles really should be throughout the whole project, from the time that the project is awarded to the time that we're hopefully cutting the ribbon on a successful project with our owner partners. So, and looking at that, I mean, there's, we really want to try to avoid scope creep. That's one of the things I think we have to look at throughout the project process. And so those guiding principles should help us to mitigate those times where we need to look at that issue. Because and part of that, I think, is getting early involvement of all the people that are going to be involved in the project, design, construction on the owner's side, in the project process, in the design process as well. We think that having construction team earlier in the project and during the design process, I think, is a really effective tool. And going through that process, I think, helps us to be able to understand where are those areas of scope creep, where we're off budget, how we get back into budget. One thing that when I was preparing for this, we were talking to some people in my office. We talked about value engineering came up, and value engineering just doesn't work, right? It's just, if we're doing value engineering, we did something wrong, and it's just like, we've got to try to find a better method to be able to avoid value engineering, because that's where I think we start to have issues moving forward. And but I think that early process of having individuals and having an engaged team all the way through is really where I think we see the value of the success.
Great, thank you. Any thoughts on? Yes, Steve.
Yeah, so I would think with that question, with that particular type of environment, that client spec bid would not work in that environment. That it would need to be the collaboration, and the collaboration would start with the construction team, design team, and owner in the room, and conveying that method and that conversation. And I don't know how that method would work in G&P, because to your point, value engineering, and that's a terrible term in our industry today, is costly. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, agreed. Obviously, I think that we talked. There's other methods now to look at it. Target value, right? How do you look at opportunities for coming in with a budget and understanding what we need to design to? And again, I think it's about just setting those precedents for where where we need to focus on. And understand that there's going to be bumps along the way, and how do you deal with those bumps along the way? I mean, especially working in a lot of people up here have existing buildings that are 50, 60, 80, 100 years old, right? I mean, you're not going to know stuff during the design process until you actually get in the building, and Jeff's team goes in and starts pulling ceilings and walls out and says, there's going to be an right? So we have to figure out how to be able to walk, move our way through those processes. But I think it's got to be a team approach. There's the only way we can do it. And be able to set ourselves up for success early in the project allows us to be able to maneuver over those speed bumps along the way.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you, Steve. Okay, Joanne Brown, another perspective from an owner. Joanne, how do you measure the success of a project team from the owner's point of view?
Okay. So from the owner's point of view, and I've been on the architectural side, and now I've been on the owner's side for quite some time, you really do wear a different hat, and you think about the project as an investment, right? This is, we do things for the long term, especially in higher ed. And so when we have a project, there are the near-term successes, the getting things done on schedule, getting things done within a budget. But there's also the longer-term value to an owner of having something that is built properly, it's built substantially, and it's an investment that's going to last for a long while. Within the project team itself, Some of that is how it starts, and I think we have some questions on that in the end. But to reiterate some of the things that Cindy said is what you look for in the beginning, you hope has been fulfilled through that project, right? You want to bring a team in that develops cohesiveness. When you develop cohesiveness and camaraderie, that leads to mutual respect, that leads to trust, that leads to being an owner. Everyone is an owner. Everyone's invested in the project. And I think that from an owner's standpoint is a true measure of success.
That's great, Joanne. Thank you. Any thoughts from Joanne? Response? Okay. Taurean.
Hi,
From
Jeff.
hey, how you doing? Good to see you. From a construction manager's perspective, what leadership qualities are essential to lead a successful project team?
Well, I'm happy enough that I recently just celebrated 20 years with Turner Construction, so I've been around some very dynamic leaders that have a lot of different leadership styles, but there are several things that are pretty common with successful leaders here for a construction manager. And I think the first one is adaptability. I think we all know on construction sites, there's never any changes, right? So I think we all know that. I think the leaders that are able to pivot and be able to still guide their team to accomplish their goal, those are some of the best leaders that we have in our industry. And also a leader that has a team first mentality. You know, it's no longer about you as the leader. It's about how can I get the best out of my team to be able to accomplish this goal. So that's, I think, is a very important quality. And lastly, just empathy. We're in a people business. We all have a lot of pressure and stress to be able to deliver on our promise when it comes to different projects and goals. But at the end of the day, it's really about the people that we work with every single day. So if they're having a personal issue that may be, having an issue with their work performance, you want to help that person, get through that issue. Not only is the best thing to do as a human, but they're going to be an advocate for you for the rest of their career and hopefully make the team better. So those are just a couple of traits.
That's great, Taurean. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Entire room. Question for you. What are the key steps you take at the beginning of a project to ensure the team is set up for success? Thoughts? Yes.
One of the things we do on our, at least our K-12 school projects, is we conduct a facilitated session with a facilitator that is very skilled in working on projects. And so the key point there is we bring everybody together in the same room and we understand everybody's role. Oftentimes, that sounds simple, but it can get convoluted. And sometimes in the course of a project, if that's not clearly identified up front, then things can kind of veer in a different direction that you're not looking for. So it's just a stopgap measure at the very beginning to bring the team together, understand everybody's role and responsibility so that the project can go more smoothly.
Okay, back to Cindy. From an owner's perspective, Jonathan talked a little bit about this, but from an owner's perspective, Cindy, how do you manage your stakeholders' expectations and keep them engaged throughout the project?
So I think the first way we engage our stakeholders is at the very earliest point when we're in like feasibility studies, engineering studies, early concept. So we make sure that they're on the team. We have the users, the department, or the people we're building a building for, doing the renovations for, in those discussions. When it then moves on and we have, the costs further developed, and we're really now starting to select an AE firm. We have in the past, it used to be just the sort of mix of construction infrastructure people on this team, but we include either the dean or the department head, the campus president on that selection team as well. So again, we want them to feel that sort of ownership in selecting, and again, we have to go through the forms. We have to take the time to make sure they understand that, and they're very good about participating. I found that to be a huge thing, just because they feel like before they weren't always involved up front. And then beyond that, once the project starts and we have just regular user meetings, they're very actively engaged, usually all the way through, the end of SDs. But then as you get into the DDs and CDs and prepare for construction, it's more of just updates. So our managers and directors send out regular updates, and if we need to do special walkthroughs or special conference calls, it's just making sure that if someone thinks of a concern and we're at CDs, we still want to hear it and try to figure that out. But we do also enforce the fact that we are freezing the design, that we're not going to be making changes, once we're in construction, and in general, trying not to have, to Jonathan's point earlier, the scope creep. But it's just keeping them along the way. And then when we are actually moving in and getting close, we have a work order system that we use for that first month or two that new users are in a building, that they can shoot us, this got dinged, or this is wrong. And it's a lot, but we sort of work through those and make sure that we haven't missed something like on a punch list.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Any questions for Cindy? Yes, you told me.
As a CM, what are things that we can do to help you update your stakeholders better?
I think the best thing is that, especially as you're in our buildings and you're walking our halls, people are always, sometimes you run into students that are lost. And so it's just always extending that hand sometimes to make sure that they're going the right direction. Sometimes users come to that CM and pull them aside and can you change this for me? And again, how we handle that, how that, you're going to, they get directed back to us, we don't want anyone or any, trade partner put on the spot for something. So I think it's just really strong communication. And then safety, always safety in the building, for not only all the workers and for everyone else that is in that building, taking that serious.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Hitomi. Okay, Jonathan, from the architectural perspective, similar question, but from your perspective, how do you involve the client in the design process to ensure that their vision is realized?
Well, I think the key is their vision. So one of the things that we do at IKM is we have a very robust, what we call stakeholder engagement process that we use up front. And what we really try to do is to bring all the voices that may touch that building from the user side into one room. Sometimes that room could be physically in a room or virtually. We've done it both ways, but it's a series of exercises that we take them through to really understand how to build consensus, and again, build those guiding principles that I kind of talked about up front. Because what we say in our office is a good idea can come from anybody. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the CEO or the dean or the president. It could be the person that is in the janitorial services. They may have the idea that helps unlock something. We don't know until you get those people in the room and engage them. And we try to really be democratic about all voices being heard in those instances. So, but that's one of the things that we really focus on, is that kind of core group. We want to create that core group that moves throughout the project process from the client side, because we want people to see this thing from A to Z, and it helps with decision making along the way. Because obviously there's timely things that need to happen along the process. We want to have a core group that we can always bounce ideas off of, get feedback from quickly in order to do that. And we also think that helps to eliminate some of that scope creep that we talked about earlier, which can really derail a project from a lot of different aspects. So. But the big thing is keeping the client engaged. I think that the engagement sessions that we do, but also engaging throughout the project process. So, now with all the tools that we have now, like PDF, Blue Studio sessions that we can have people interact with our drawing sets, with our design, thoughts on renderings and stuff like that, and be able to give people the opportunity to see things, but also the opportunity to kind of digest things as well. It's one thing to be able to look at things and make a quick decision, but giving our clients the time to have that, kind of time to digest it and then react to it, I think helps get us a better outcome in the future. So we really try to focus on being timely with those questions and answers, and showing them things, and not worrying about, kind of coming and just saying, ta-da, what do you think? You know, I mean,
Sure.
that's not,
Yeah.
doesn't always go well sometimes. So we're really trying to figure out what our process is to be able to keep them engaged throughout the whole time. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. Any thoughts, comments? Okay. Joanne? Yes. Yeah.
You spoke sort of broadly about, you know, watching scope creep, and we know that's really important about keeping projects on budget as you're going through design. I guess I've been on both sides of the table as the architect in the room and now as the owner, and we see, you know, our budgets get derailed all the time. I'm just curious. And being the architect, I know how difficult it can be to raise your hand and have those conversations. Like, what real tactical strategies, what has been successful for you in leading those conversations to steer back? You know, I know in practical practice, it's one thing to say, you know, we have to watch for this, but like seriously, like, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that's where it comes into having our construction partners also involved as well, because I think if it really comes down to budget, and that's going to be the thing that really pushes the project through, we need to have those conversations up front. But I think then again about like having that core team is really important, because that core team is really the value of them is talking with those users and understanding what's the reason for the change, what's the reason for the thing that we need, why we need to kind of go in a different direction with the design process a little bit, or the design in general. I think that's important to have that core group that understands the budget, understands that where we can kind of give and take a little bit, because I think that's what a lot of that process is give and take. But I think I don't necessarily have, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think I'm trying to get there in terms of like, we don't have really a process that sits there and says, you know, it needs to be this or that. I think it's more about like what's the important thing to have, and I think those guiding principles help us along the way a little bit, right? I mean, understanding that this is the budget, we can't move off of it. Okay, well, let's move ourselves back and forth during the design process to meet that need. If it's something else that's driving it, then we need to understand what's driving it and be able to work that way. So.
Yes, Steve.
So, notorious for as the client begins to move into that building, the changes start. So, and maybe it's understanding what they were receiving. Are you beginning to utilize more visual, so that a client has the ability of a virtual tour of their building, so they can actually see what's happening? So they come into space and, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. I don't like it. Let's change it.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about in our office is about, you know, we take for granted people can read a floor plan, right? I mean, you don't think about that, but we do it every day, and everybody at this table can read a floor plan. But somebody who's working in a laboratory or teaching a class, and that's the one, you know, this is the one and only time they ever had their kind of touch with this kind of process, they may not have that ability to be able to read a 2D floor plan and understand three-dimensionally how that works. And so some of the things that I think we're seeing doing now more is more, because we work in a BIM environment now, we use BIM as a tool to be able to walk through certain areas of our building when we really feel like there's a value to get the user to see exactly what they're getting in a lot of ways. So we have that ability to do that. You know, most architects do nowadays. So I think it's more about like offering that ability to be able to walk the users through the project in a three-dimensional manner, whether it's through like Enscape or Lumion or other things like that. We use a lot of those tools now almost every day, and our staff is very well versed in that, so we're able to do that kind of on the fly.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it. Joanne, from an owner's perspective, how do you assess and manage risks associated with your project team from an owner's perspective?
So from an owner's perspective, there's a couple things that we at CASE like to do. One of the things has been mentioned here, and it's really getting a team together in the beginning of the project. The latest projects we've done recently, we've got our CM on board during schematic design. And so we're doing schematic design, budget exercises with a consultant, and we're doing them with the CM. And you know, you're really getting that comparison. So that's one hard kind of fact. I think the other thing is just understanding what risks might be out there. And as an owner, you need to educate yourself to the current market conditions, the current economic conditions, and be aware of those things so that you, as an owner, can kind of create your own little risk register of what items you are concerned about and see as potential risks, whether it's something, like long lead time items that are definitely going to affect that schedule, whether it's being able to do the construction work in bid packages so we can purchase things first, things of that nature. And then also when you've got that team together in the beginning, you can talk about risks together. Okay, these are our risks as the owner. CM, what's your risks? User group, what's your risks? We can only move in this 1 month out of the year. Well, gosh, that wasn't our original schedule. So I think it's something that has to happen and be monitored from the beginning. But then there's also how do you reduce the risk? And I think that, as from an owner's standpoint, you need to have your guiding principles, your process. Those guiding principles will lead to how the projects work and sticking to that. And, some projects you'll develop a project mantra or, the theme for it. And there's many times during the process of designing and building where you need to go back to that and remember, what is it here? What's the main focus or the couple items? As Jonathan said, is it budget? Is it creating a new future-proof environment? What are those guiding principles that are set in place for a successful project, but also to reduce those risks up front? And I think too, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but a team that has that collaboration and has that trust, when you develop that, you're not afraid to come to the table and say, hey, I think we got a problem. Because the sooner everybody knows that, we're all together solving it. You want to be able to solve it and have a conversation before anybody starts pointing fingers. No one wants that to be happening. So.
Thank you, Joanne. Thoughts, comments? Yes.
Simple question, but difficult to do. How do you manage the risk associated with your team member firms losing major leadership that's assigned to your project? How do you manage that risk?
Yeah, that is a loaded question. I think part of that is really when you're assembling that alliance with your design professionals, with your construction professionals, you're hiring a team. And so I know when we're doing the interview process and things like that, we don't want to see just one person show up. We want to know who's doing this part, who's doing this part, who is going to be that day-to-day contact for us. And when you have that kind of structure in place, if one of the pieces does come out of that, the other members are still aware enough to kind of keep things going. So.
Thanks, Joanne. Thank you for that question. Great question. Taurean, from the construction manager's perspective, how do you ensure that all parties, including trade partners and consultants, are integrated into the project team and working towards the same goals?
I was just thinking to myself, I could have shared your notes. I had the same thing to start. It starts early in the beginning of the project, really getting all the key stakeholders together and really establish, what is success like for that project. We know a lot of different individuals from a CM or a designer can perform this work, but it's really all about that process to get to the finish line. So if the stakeholders have buy-in, then they're going to stay integrated throughout. I think that the next step is to obviously develop a plan to be able to measure those plans and successes that you kind of put together. So whether that's monthly principal meetings or things of that nature, you definitely want to make sure you put a plan in place. And also, we like to use a lot of visual management. There's just so much information on a project site that, you know, you can come with 100 RFIs and 100, you know, different documents, but let's kind of get that information in summary level form, and whether it's Power BI or different dashboards, so we can really focus on where do we need to put the attention and the medicine at. So visual management is definitely key. And then for me, I'm old school, so I like to pick up the phone and really talk one-on-one. So you have those big room conversations with all the stakeholders in the room, but at the end of the day, you know, let's have that one-on-one interaction where I can call not only that principal, the middle level management down to the intern. How are we doing? And that's how you're going to really see if you're still driving towards success and accomplishing all your goals.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Taurean. Thoughts, comments? Yes.
I got a question.
And I think, like, with all four of these questions, like, sort of a theme in everyone's answers is early collaboration and building trust. I think all of our ideal states, we work with a repeat project team, but the reality is that that doesn't happen often. So I'm curious, from your perspective, like, what are some examples of things that you've seen that really do build that trust early on for successful projects you've been a part of?
Well, I say for me, really trust is kind of earned. So you have to really establish that plan, but until you kind of go through a challenge and they kind of see how you react in those difficult situations, that continues to build that trust. That's why we like to say that 75% of our, you know, projects are from repeat clients. So, because they understand this is when you hire Turner, you're going to get a certain level of service. So I think just, you know, going through the fire together and building that trust is really how it continues to build.
And I would say from the owner's standpoint, you know, we're diverse and we have big projects and small projects. And so you may be awarded something that you see as smaller or not as intensive, but those are really tests for us. That's, you know, we've got projects that we can start people on and see how successful they are. And they may not be as complex, but they really are just as important because they need to get done. So I know from the owner's side, and having different types of construction. You know, we have everything from administrative offices to food service, which can be complex, to housing that can be complex, to labs, where BSL labs, which are super complex. And so if we are starting to develop that relationship, we started at a small level where we can develop the relationship, see how it's handled, and then, you know, expound on that if it's successful. If not, you won't get that call.
Right.
Just to add on, I think a lot of it's about transparency as well, and I think there's transparency along a lot of different levels of the project. For on the design side, I think being transparent about where we're at, where we're not, is okay. It's okay to say that we just don't know yet, or we're not there yet, or we're working on it. I think it's okay to, you know, I think the worst thing is to cause people is to try to hold things back and saying we're gonna make sure it's great instead of good. Sometimes is good enough, right? To be able to continue to move a process forward, or working with the data and the information that we have, and understanding that we're just going to make decisions on maybe 60 or 70% of the data that we really want to, you know, that we have, but we don't have that 25 or 30% that makes us sure, you know. So I think, but again, it builds back to what everybody's been saying is working together. It's a trust factor, and having that trust along the whole team.
Joanne, I'm glad you brought that up about the diversity of projects, right? Because at OSU, we do probably the greatest dollar value in CMR, but certainly not the greatest volume of projects. So a lot of the conversation has kind of lended itself to that structure of a CMR and that opportunity to have early collaboration among, you know, the whole project team. And I guess I just want to make the point that regardless of the project delivery method, we do need project teams to still behave as teams. So coming in on a design bid build with the right mindset that, you know, you are still working as a team to deliver a successful outcome and not losing the site that just because, it's not a big CMR, early collaborative method, we still need teams to bring it home.
I was gonna to build on what you were saying, Jennifer. I think that just a few years ago when we were doing some of our bond project, most of them ended up being CMR and design build, but there were I think there was 2 that sort of were underway that ended up being CMA before things could get cut over. And similar to what John from OFCC said, we brought in a facilitator, we got everybody together, we talked through how things were going to work, protocols, communication, escalate, solution, and we kept sort of getting them back together periodically. Everyone was nervous on the bidding side, and it went incredibly well. And we did 2 huge projects that did not have one claim, that did not have one problem, but it was sort of, people had really cut over to the other methods, and so we almost had to remind people, okay, how do you use this method, and how do we all work in this method? So very similar.
Great conversation. Thank you. For the entire team, culture. We've talked a lot about the questions going back and forth from starting off the right way from day one, but from the audience's point of view, how do you create and maintain a positive team culture, not only in the beginning, but throughout the life cycle of the project? Ideas? Thoughts? What do you do when you get in a rut? You have facilitations, you have timeouts. Chris Orlando has a good one here.
I mean, I think overall from a, not to get into what you were talking about with facilitation, but I think building that culture throughout the project. So we've seen everything from, cookouts, Joanne, HEC, there were cookouts with the contractors, with the design team, with basically anyone who was going to be working on that project, in the lot. So you had the ability to, interact, interface, I've used this analogy before in some meetings, but if you live on your street, you've got the neighbor who next door, their grass gets long, and you're good friends with them. You go over and you're, hey, your grass is long, cut your damn grass, right? And you got the neighbor up the street who you kind of see every once in a while, and you might hint around that, your grass looks a little long as you're riding by and waving. Then you got the neighbor up the street who you don't like, no one likes, and you just call the city. So, teams generally function better when there's camaraderie and you're friendly. So, there are teams that we've worked with over the years, other vendors and contractors, where you can have very open dialogue, whereas, if you don't establish those relationships, it takes a little bit different challenge. It's a little bit different setup. So, we've seen a lot of those interactive things, whether it's a picnic, a cookout, after hours type sessions, but team building events that really draw people together and realize that they do have a lot of commonality. And I think that just builds better project teams and keeps that positive team moving forward.
Anybody else? Okay.
I think we talk a lot about establishing project process up front and getting everybody together. I don't think there's enough attention paid to the fact that processes change and teams change and evolve. Taking the same amount of time that you take at the beginning of the project at the beginning of each phase, or at a milestone or something that comes along, a bump in the road where things change, where everyone can just take a moment, pause, and recognize the fact that there's something different going on here, whether it's the focus of the phase, whether it's a key team player, whether it's a change in scope, whatever it may be. Taking the time to bring everybody back together and discuss how that's going to impact the success of the project is really key in maintaining everybody rowing in the same direction from the beginning to the end.
Excellent.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, Cindy. Opposite of creating positive culture, conflict resolution. So as the owner, can you share an example of a conflict that arose during a project, but more importantly, how was it solved?
So I know no one likes to talk about anything ever going wrong, but we all know it does, right? And so, but I've had sort of the extreme example where, it was just painful for a long time, but we got through it. I've had the example where there was 6 months or so that we really had to readjust, and then just small things that the team had to solution through, but I think the key thing is, you could see it happening up front, usually because there's some snag somewhere, whether it is, lead time or someone's understaffed. And so getting out in the open and talking about it, we have our weekly, on a project, our weekly OACM meetings where we're all coming together. And so talking through it. The other thing is, though, sometimes it is a people issue. Sometimes, and I would say 2 out of the 3 sometimes that I've seen in some of the bigger ones, the materials and some of the sequencing we can work through, and even the costs I think we can all work through. But when it's a personality issue, that is the toughest type of one to try to fix. And so in that case, we try to see if we can diffuse that, if we can bring the team together sometimes to facilitate, but sometimes it's a one-on-one. And I've had to change people out, where we've had to sort of switch some personalities that just clicked better. I do feel comfortable to have very open and honest conversations with those firms or those leaders, and vice versa. I think they feel comfortable. But it's hard, if I were to call and say somebody that you've had on your team for a while, for whatever reason, is not clicking with this other team, it's hard to hear that, especially since you've seen that person do really good work. So usually then I invite them to come, maybe sort of have some other technical folks with them shadow and see if they can see what's going wrong. Is the person overwhelmed? Are they split between too many jobs? But there's usually a core. It's not a straight personality issue. It's more of a stress level that's coming out in personality. To me, the technical ones, we typically have found good partners that are willing to solution through, and we come up with options that keep us on track, or hopefully within cost.
Great perspective. Any other thoughts on examples of conflict resolution and how things were solved? Okay. All right. Jonathan, from an architectural perspective of coordinating with construction managers, how about that?
My favorite thing.
What are your strategies for effectively coordinating with CMs to avoid rework and ensure the design is implemented as planned?
It says it all.
Well, we've talked a lot about, I think collaboration obviously is the first part in that relationship building. I think that's easy. Anticipation, I think, is really key from having our construction partners to really understand when they see things coming in the future, right? I use this example of getting a phone call from a contractor, and hey, we're pouring the slab, the concrete truck's here, and we need to know where the slab edge is. And we got to pour it in the next 40 minutes because the concrete's going to harden, right? And you're like, you didn't see this before, right? It just happens, right? And that's it. That's the the way I would look, describe that situation. But honestly, just understanding that we're all looking forward. We're always looking ahead. We're always trying to understand, anticipate, understand where we're going to see the conflicts, and try to move the boat around those rocks as we see them coming through. But also, I think one thing we don't talk about is creativity. Some of the most creative people I've been around are actually foremen on a construction site, and finding methods and being able to communicate those methods back to us, because what we're drawing is the final state of everything, right? But we're not doing the means and methods to get there, right? And I think I've seen a lot of creativity from people in the field, and I think that it's undervalued in a lot of ways, and our construction partners, I think, are undervalued in that sense. So having those relationships and building that level of trust, I think, is really important. On the architecture side, I think it's about staffing, how we staff our projects through. We really want to make sure at our firm that we keep the same people from A to Z, that we have a project architect and a project manager that sees this thing through the construction, builds those relationships, but also has the expertise to be able to understand when they need to pivot. And I think the pivot, there's always going to be a point in a project where you have to pivot, especially in the construction side. So,
Great point, Jonathan. Thank you. Thoughts? Okay. Joanne, from a long-term partnership perspective, from the owner's point of view, what qualities do you look for in teams that you, similar question that we've already addressed a little bit, but for teams that you repeatedly work with, what are the qualities that you're looking for in these teams?
Number one, mutual respect. And that can mean a lot of different things. Productivity, honesty. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. We're sophisticated. We know. Honesty. We don't always have to agree, but we have the mutual respect that we'll find a way, we'll find a solution, we'll find a pathway, and we'll do it as that collective entity.
Great, thank you.
Kind of simple.
Thoughts? Okay. Taurean, construction management perspective on safety. How does a strong focus on safety contribute to the overall success of a project team?
Well, I think we can all agree in this room that safety is the #1 priority on any construction site. I mean, it doesn't matter how great we design a building or, how great the project was from a profitability standpoint. If someone gets seriously injured or, God forbid, a fatality, that the entire project team has failed and it's going to have a dark cloud over that project. So I'm not going to spend this time making everybody go through an hour-long safety orientation that Turner offers, but I wanted to take a different approach. Under the safety umbrella, what we're really focused on is really creating the right environment and the worker experience. So you're going to start to see a lot more of that over the next few years. I say a couple years back, we really took a hard line with trying to eliminate all hate and bias on our project sites. And I think if anybody's ever walked a project site, you've seen those porta-johns and they're just covered in graffiti and, it's not the nice place to go use the facility. And it was just, that was business as usual. You would go there and it's just so much graffiti. Some of it's funny, but some of that graffiti did make people feel a certain type of way. So we tried everything from, monitoring and putting cameras, and as early as this past summer, we took a hard line and said, we're getting rid of all porta-johns on every project site. And as a general manager that's responsible for profit and loss, I'm like, okay, we're going to buy toilet trailers for every project, but you have to draw the line somewhere, and it's having an air-conditioned space where someone can use the facility and wash their hands before they actually eat a sandwich. That's something we all take for granted, so I think that's just something that's so important, and as you enhance that worker experience, they're naturally going to be more safe on a project site.
Excellent, Taurean, thank you. Thoughts from the safety perspective? Okay, folks, last question, and it's yours. So for the entire room on diversity and inclusion, how do you ensure that your project team is diverse and inclusive? What impact do you feel does diversity have on the success of a project? And panel, please feel free to weigh in as well. Excuse me. Thoughts? This is a big thing out there now. No thoughts? Yes.
So I head up inclusion and diversity with our company. Not sure how I inherited that, but I did. My feeling of this biggest success is the impact of a company that I'm working with. So as an example, I've been mentoring. I mentored a gentleman. He got in the business about, 12 years ago maybe. And spending time with him and to understand business and how we do things, and to the point where he and I will get together. He'll reach out to me about every 3 months now, and it's quote unquote it's time to have a cup of coffee. We need to chat, and it's rarely about a project we're involved with him with. It's I'm having this issue somewhere else. What are your thoughts? Kind of thing. So that to me, anyway, on a personal note, it's just that is you're helping somebody, another person, to be able to have success not only in their business but in their life as well. And you mentioned 38 years. I'm 30. I'll start by 38 years, so it's coming. That's where we are. This is what we need to do to give back, to give other people other opportunities. That's a success.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Yes.
So as a designer, an engineer, we're guided mostly on, being technical, so that really shouldn't matter what our background is or what gender we are. But I think that filling a team that's diverse and inclusive can give a project a different perspective, and that has value. So if you have people coming from all different backgrounds and different genders or religion or whatever, I think it adds value. Yes, it makes us better.
One thing I'm interested to add into our typical definition of inclusion is thinking about how we're approaching the project teams with different experience levels as they come to the workforce. I physically have been told with a very experienced team that we did not win a project because we lacked the experience that was needed, or rather that the team that won the project had much more experience, and it was purely off of assumptions in age in what was going on rather than the project experience, because the project experience is pretty on par to it. So yeah, larger question, what steps are you taking to think through that larger inclusion with the experience levels included?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, because I had a thought along the same line, is, again, when there's some of that diversity and you lose a member of that team, it enables, the kind of the hurt to not hurt, because this person's going to fill in and that, and whether it's from a skill level, whether it's from an age level, whether it's from a discipline level, it can help fill that gap when that occurs.
Great points. Well, folks, hopefully what you've been able to feel is the culture of what Cogence is all about. I am thrilled we had so many conversations from the owner's standpoint, and to have that comfort to be able to have those conversations with the owner, for us to understand what happens on the other side of how you deal with conflict and some of their challenges. But what you're also getting, again, trade partner perspective, architectural perspective, construction management perspective, consultant perspective. But hopefully you have quite a few takeaways that you can take back in order to help you in the future create that winning and successful team. On behalf, thank you all for all of your collaboration. But on behalf of the panel with Cindy, Jonathan, Joanne, and Taurean, we thank you for your time. And as we've done with all the other sessions, I see an error message. I certainly hope that QR code works. If not, please ask Colin Runninger for help. Okay, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.